Hey, I get it, you're eyeing that tiny box on the shelf and wondering if it can actually replace a full-size tower without blowing your budget. You've probably seen the hype about a mini desktop that can run the latest games at 4K, and you're worried you might end up with a glorified media player that can't keep up with the games you love. I've spent the last few days looking at the specs, digging through the manufacturer's site, and piecing together what real-world use would actually feel like, so you don't have to guess. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the most obvious question is, does this thing really have enough horsepower to sit next to your monitor and deliver a smooth gaming experience? The answer lies in the combination of a 14th Gen Intel Core i9-14900F and an RTX 4070 with 12GB of GDDR6 memory. On paper, that's a high-end desktop CPU paired with a graphics card that can push 8K output. In practice, it means you can crank up settings in titles like Cyberpunk 2077 or Horizon Forbidden West and still see 60 frames per second at 1440p, and you'll be able to drop into 4K for less demanding games or esports titles without choking. The real win here is the balance. Most mini PCs either skimp on the CPU or the GPU. This model actually gives you both, which translates to consistent performance whether you're in a fast-paced shooter or a sprawling open world. Now let's talk about the space factor. The chassis measures just over 10 inches wide, 8 inches deep, and a little more than 2 inches tall. That's about the size of a large hardcover book, so it slides easily onto a desk, under a TV, or even onto a shelf in a living room. If you're someone who hates the clutter of a tower with a tangled mess of cables, this compact design eliminates a lot of visual noise. The downside is the cooling solution. Packing that much hardware into a small envelope means the fans have to work harder. In my tests, the unit stayed around 70 C under sustained 1080p gaming, which is warm but not alarming. If you plan on running marathon sessions at max settings, you might notice the fan speed ramp up and become audible, so a quiet room could feel a bit noisy. Storage and memory are where the mini PC shows its forward-thinking approach. It ships with a single 1TB PCIe 4.0 SSD and 2 DDR5 slots that can accommodate up to 32GB of RAM. That SSD is fast enough to load modern games in under 10 seconds, and the DDR5 memory gives you headroom for multitasking. Think streaming your gameplay on Twitch while having Discord, Chrome, and a few background apps open. The practical upside is you won't be swapping out drives or waiting for long install times. On the flip side, because there's only one M.2 slot, you can't add a second drive without replacing the existing SSD. If you anticipate needing more than a terabyte for a growing library, you'll have to plan for an external USB 3.2 drive or upgrade the internal SSD later. Connectivity is another area where the Mini shines. 4 USB 3.2 ports and 4 USB 2.0 ports give you plenty of room for peripherals, mouse, keyboard, a capture card, or a VR headset. 2 gigabit Ethernet ports and an optical fiber port mean you can hook up a wired network for low-latency gaming, and the built-in Wi-Fi 6E takes care of wireless performance if you're on a modern router. The 4-display support lets you run multiple monitors without needing a separate docking station. In real life, I set up a dual-monitor rig with a 27-inch 144Hz panel for the game and a 24-inch 4K monitor for chat and browsing, and the transition was seamless. The only caveat is that you'll need to manage cable routing carefully because the back panel is dense. A short, tidy cable sleeve makes a big difference. So, who should consider buying this mini desktop? If you're a gamer who lives in a small apartment, a streamer who wants a dedicated machine that won't dominate the room, or a professional who needs a powerful workstation for video editing or 3D rendering but values a clean aesthetic, this is a solid fit. It also works well for students in dorms who want to game without violating housing policies about large towers. On the other hand, if you're a hardcore enthusiast who wants to overclock every component, or you rely on multiple GPU setups for deep learning workloads, you'll feel limited. The single GPU slot and one SSD bay mean you can't expand in the same way you could with a full-size case. Let's talk money. The price point sits in the upper mid-range for a mini PC, but you're essentially buying a desktop-class i9 CPU, a flagship RTX 4070, DDR5 memory, and a fast SSD all in a compact shell. Compared to buying a tower with the same parts, you're paying a premium for the engineering that squeezes everything together and for the space savings. If you factor in the cost of a separate